Right, so we are live and hello and welcome to the third conversation in the Emergent Leadership Series. My name is Rukmini and I've been hosting these conversations with an intent to sense into how each one of us, needs to reassess our relationship with leadership in whichever spaces and roles we operate in our lives, in our work, so as to serve life on this planet in a conscious manner going forward. And in that process, hopefully sustain ourselves as well. And today is our first convergence conversation. For those of us who are familiar with the series, you would know that we are working with two types of conversation, divergence and convergence. And the divergence conversations are about reaching out and getting inspired by leaders emerging on the ground, doing really admirable work in the times that we live in. And the convergence conversations are about taking in those conversations, pausing, and sensing into what we can learn and frame about leadership as we go along. So today we have with us Amel Murphy. Hi, Amel, and welcome. And also welcome to our viewers on Facebook. And Amel, of course, is a dear friend, a colleague, and I also often think of her as a co-traveler in many ways. Professionally, of course, she's had a fabulous international corporate career and now consults with organizations in the leadership space. And having said that, one tradition that we've been following in this series is also about reframing how we connect with ourselves and with each other. And therefore, for me, Amel, it's also important to talk about how I relate to your being more than your doing. And I've always admired the curiosity with which you approach life and the sensitivity and the of really dogged determination to pursue consciousness. I don't know of any other way to describe it. So yeah, thank you for being who you are. And I see Shruti in the audience. Hey, Shruti, thank you for joining us. And for those of us who are listening in, please do post your comments or questions, and we will attempt to incorporate them into the conversation as we go along. So, Amel, as we converge today, of course, the intention is to sense into the two previous conversations we've had in this series with Srilakshmi, Divakar, and with Biren Bhuta. And while we will come to those conversations shortly, I'm also eager to know how you are sensing into leadership in the lockdown. I know you've been spending a lot of time in nature and sensing into a lot of what's emerging as natural design and also writing about it. So is there something you'd like to share around that?
Yeah. You know what it's alive for me at the moment, and the more as I was walking today, actually through the park, and I was very present with this sense of equilibrium. There's a kind of a realignment that's happening, and that realignment for me, it happens like as I walk. Like there's a rhythmic thing as I walk into the space, as I walk through the forest, as I walk barefooted. That's one thing. So some people, like one person commented, he says the Mowgli of the park. So fair enough. If you see me that's fantastic. But at the same time, I feel like as I walk in the parks, I'm sensing into a new rhythm that brings that equilibrium, that balance that we have been missing, or I've been missing myself. I don't, and I didn't even notice. And that rhythm has always been there, but I've never noticed that. So what is this moment bringing at the moment? It's a new level of paying attention, of observation that was not present before. And with that observation, what I'm noticing is things are shifting inside. Like I feel like my inner space is no different from my outer space. It's one. It's merging. Like it feels like the more I slow down, the more I pay attention, the more I pay attention actually and take notes, things are shifting, and there is no me, you, but there is not me or we, but there is us. There's only all. Like there is no boundaries. There's no space. Like there's no that. I don't know. There seems something has dissipated, like this completely dissolved, and there is only. I'm in awe. That's what I would say. Like the state that I'm with is awe. I'm just like amazed how much is showing up at the moment in the midst of all.
I'm tempted to add, it's almost like, what I guess Otto Scharmer would describe as new organs of perception opening up, right? And I was recently sharing with someone about how, particularly given the work I've been doing in the lockdown, a lot of it's almost like the community is becoming an organ of perception. Like you said, that there is really no difference between the me and the we. It's merging in many ways. And at the same time, that there's also a spaciousness for the me and the we to coexist. As well. So there's this very lived paradox in play.
Yeah, and I feel like for me personally, what I'm sensing, there is a really I stepped into me. And that's what shifted. Because I stepped in more fully into me, that's why I'm it's that notion, I only see you through me. I see you through me. So whatever I am, that's how I can see you. I can't see you for who you are. I don't know who you are fully. The way I connect with you is through my lens. So the more I am more into me. And I feel like at the moment, the way it feels for me personally, it's there is that deep knowing that I can't describe. There's no word. Like this is the other thing that I'm sitting with, that I have no word for that state of being that I'm in at the moment. There is a deep knowing and deep trust in the midst of all, that I know that I can't go back to the way I was living my life. I know, although it was feeding me, like, gave me a lot of pleasures and this and that, but that was not enough, and that was not true. And the current me is trying to find its own voice. It's a new voice. It's actually trying to manifest, but I do have the experience of it within me, because when I walk, like, when I only can think about it. There's one word that came up now, right? It's restorative. There's a restoration that is taking place at the moment for me. something is being restored. And as I say that, the word integration comes, but it's not fully embodied. It's in the body, and there is a strong knowing within the body, but it's not yet. It has not yet found its expression. It's trying to figure out the form, kind of thing now. The new form. That's the thing. There's a new form.
It's almost like a baby gestating out in the world instead of inside in the womb, right? It's like the world has become the womb right now.
Yeah.
So it's a very intriguing feeling. I wonder if you have anything to say around, as you're listening to all of this and the new rhythm and the learning that's coming, not so much through knowing and external knowledge, but learning coming through experience in some sense, in a learning through living.
Yeah.
What's this learning saying about leadership for each of us in our lives, in our work, in our being?
Yeah. So one thing that is alive for me at the moment is that we can't continue on doing the leadership that we did before. We tried to control and frame from the head. Like, we have been using best practice and good practices for too long. That they became the crutch, not the enabler. And we have relied so much on the external world or the external rhythm to tell us what's good, what's important, what matters and all, that we have actually lost touch with our inner voice, that inner rhythm. For me, the rhythm that I'm talking about, the flow, the resilience that within, that I'm born to, has not seen voice. And I think these times are inviting us as leaders to step into, a friend, actually, Shruti, pointed out, like as we were talking one day, about this sacred power and the shared power. And for me, here is a sacred power, is how do we step into our sacred power? How can we start actually listening to our inner power? But you can't do that with being on the go all the time. I think this, like for me, what he showed, like this is a real experiment. It's really an experience of what do you start paying attention to when you slow down. And there is a new way of slowing down. It's not like I slow down, like, I take time, I take breaks, I go on holiday, I meditate and all. But to be honest, in all of those breaks that I was taking, I was still doing things. Like I need to put this pause in. I need to go for a walk. I have to. While I'm walking, I have not paid attention to anything. And I come back with the same stress that I left with, by the way. The same state of being. I'm in rushed, I'm in this and that. Where now, because the external demand is not here, it allowed me to actually enjoy and be in the walking and see the beauty that emerges. These are not imposed poses anymore. For me, they are actually sacred spaces that I like. It's important for me, I feel like, moving forward as leaders, that we actually find our sacred space where we really, really disengage with whatever, in order for us to see what is wanting to emerge. And also this time, a lot of people keep saying we're not wired for complexity, we wire for simplicity. That's true. And another element is I realize is we're so complicated. We're actually wired for complication rather than simplicity. We're not wired for simplicity. We actually complicate the simple.
Yeah.
And anything, like actually, to the lady that you had the first dialogue with, I don't want to say her name wrongly. Srilakshmi. So Srilakshmi pointed out something around being a creator rather than consumers. Everything that we engage with, we have been consuming those things in order to create a state of being, of calmness, this and that, mindfulness, sports and all. But actually, we have not, even with introducing them, we went into this with the intent to bypass and not to experience. So, and we get frustrated, and they became the extra thing, the luxury thing. Like we think it's, I don't have space for them. I need to create space for it. But actually they're essentials.
Yeah.
They're essentials for our well-being, for our sanity. And I think that's one of the, the few things that this moment is unfolding for me. And also there's one thing that another thing that keeps like that is very present as well. We can't keep on avoiding, denying, or exaggerating things for ourselves just so that we don't stay true to ourselves. I think like we have done a lot of avoidance and a lot of exaggeration of what we are bringing and this and that. Like, we heightened, we gave material things so much. We gave systems, like, we were talking about like systems like regulatory bodies and all, so much power that we're now confined and we're not able to find our own expression, even though we sense that we're trapped. It's not serving, but we're not speaking to it. So we have actually denied our own authenticity, our own truth to come to, because we're not willing to confront. And I know for myself, like, when you describe me, that's so true. I am stubborn, like, but actually I realized one of my values as I was doing sacred geometry, trying to understand actually values, not from the usual thing, take Barrett's, take these assessments and you will know your values. For me, I wanted to see it from a sacred place. And what showed up for me is every time you ask me to draw and people tell me stay within the line, that's what I do not like. One of my values, I don't want to be within the line. And yet, and my whole being engaged in trying to stay within the line, and that just shrank me. Like, I made me not show up and not be authentic to myself. And I think that we need to work on why we keep on doing that as well. Like, we need to face traumas that we experience. We need to label things that don't work and don't feel like we are going to be shaming our parents or our society or downgrading. It's actually upgrading our societies. We're upgrading ourselves. We're honoring ourselves by actually naming the dysfunction in meaningful way, not in replicating the anger and the bullying and the whole, Yeah.
There's so much potency to the several things that you shared in that process, and I want to let that sink in. And much as I also want to point and deepen further into what Srilakshmi had shared in her conversation, I also want to, before that, deepen a little bit into what you just said and go back to what you spoke of as sacred power. And I know that there's a lot of mysticism around the term sacred, and there are several connotations that one associates with it. And so would you want to demystify that? sacred power in the context of personal leadership? How would that look like?
For me, sacred power is about speaking your truth, your authenticity in leadership. And what it is, how it feels to me, is when my inner power is greater than my inner critique. Wow. That's how I sense it. It's like we all have those insecurities or moments where we feel small. We feel like, am I doing the right thing? Those doubts, those fears, those moments of shame, guilt, a lot of things that gets in the way of us moving forward. But there's one thing that was always true, like that never ever left me. I had a question when I was young. I was reading a book to Herman Hesse, and he says, I would like to live through the prompting of my true heart. Why is it so difficult? And for me, it was like, the question became for me, how can I live true to the prompting of my heart? And from that, a lot of journeys started. A lot of things started. Like a lot of more questions showed up, actually, not answers. More questions showed up to actually take me home, take me to the true, to kind of refine the true meaning of my true heart. And I don't say I arrived. No, my biggest journey at the moment, actually, I embarked in, I said, 3 or 4 years ago, I said to myself, I want to go home to my heart, because I'm very soft, yet I'm really afraid of being with people. Like I hold back from showing my connection. I yearn for connection. Yet when I'm connected, I hold back because I'm afraid of being hurt. And I never understood where that came from. Because I didn't have a trauma. Like I didn't have a major, like, let's say not trauma. Like I didn't have a major event in my childhood that would have, in my family, I would say, in my family, that would indicate that I could have developed an attachment, of some sort. But what I realized is actually, although I didn't have it in my family, but the land I was living in at the time as a young child was going through terrorism. I was affected, even though within my home, within what my parents did, they protected us, they sheltered us. And with all their attempt to shelter us, I held in my body, in my being, in my soma, the trauma of that land. I carry it with me. And that's what actually made me realize as well, as actually trauma is a collective event. It's not an individual thing. Because now I have the experience of it. I know what it feels. And this moment is the same. It's another moment that makes me realize is actually, if you were to tell me the basics, my basics are covered. It lasts for 10 years, I'm covered. I feel I'm covered. I trust I'm covered. Like if that's what people want, like that's what a lot of around us are seeking, actually, is the basic not being there. That's why we're being triggered and we're scared and terrified. So if I was to say these are covered, and yet I'm impacted by this in ways that I can't describe, it really turns my heart. And I can't just sit back. I could choose to sit back because I'm not impacted. I'm not infected by, I'm not frontline. But I am. Whether I want to or not, I am. And that's to the interconnectedness for me. It's a real thing. It's not a concept. It's not a concept. If after this, we have not realized how are we interdependent on one another for our healing, for our progress, for our growth, for our well-being, for our sanity, that means we may not learn it. I don't know what we would need to learn it.
Yeah.
What?
As you say that, the natural connection with the land that each of us has, which is not even in our conscious awareness, but it's so visceral in many ways. And also a very proven connection now that we experience that this tiny microorganism traveled from some unknown market in China around the world, and it's brought us to a standstill. That's how connected we are to each other and to the land. And while it's brought us to a standstill, to me that also brings a lot of hope, also because we can use that same connection, that same network to transmit healing, to transmit a new way of being that might support us all and be more inclusive than we have been in the past.
Yeah, actually,
what is cause for concern also seems to be cause for hope.
Yeah, it's actually. I work with a lot of people. I'm still working, like supporting a lot of people through this journey, and the acceleration of the learnings and the embodiment of the experience, because of what this experience is bringing, is beyond comprehension. Things that people have been sitting with, grappling with for years and years. Now it's like after session 2, 3, like things are just emerging. Because again, there's one thing I'm realizing with this pause it's brought us back to a very fundamental piece that we actually lost touch with, and that's our body. We sit within the body, like, the earth is a body, Us, we have a body. And as we come together, we create a new body. So there is a new sensing to that new organ. That's why the word organ, I really loved it as well when they brought, because we're actually tapping into this intelligence. We are owning, like this is again about that secret power. We are actually finding, for me, the equilibrium is between my head, like we've been cognitive for too long, and into the body, embodying things. So the experience, this is an experience that enabled us to tap into this. So the alignment, that's what I feel, even like as I walk, like, and we started this lockdown from end of February, and just look at nature. It unfolded every day in the walk. Something showed up, and something in nature has showed up that wasn't there the night before. This is just one night and morning. Yeah. So nothing stays. Like nothing is. If you start paying attention, like even in our bodily sensation, to our experience, we're not feeling the same way with this experience as we felt the first day when we entered into it. And we may have had perception of what will be and how it will come out. And maybe that perception is still the same, maybe has changed. Who knows? Like, maybe it was completely out of not what you hoped for or exactly what you dreamed about, So for me, I went in for hibernation, for time to sleep. And I found myself like actually like popping, like with so much insights and so it was not a time to sleep, it was time to really awaken.
Yeah, I think as we die to the old, we're also awakening to the new. So it's in a way a simultaneous process. One of the many paradoxes we seem to be living right now. Srilakshmi in her conversation spoke a lot about consumerism and how we really need to shift the way we consume, the way we consume nature, the way we consume products, services, resources, and so on. And I think that's an aspect of leadership that each of us needs to embody. we are without exception, regardless of age or race or gender. All of us are consumers one way or the other. And how do you sense our leadership emerging in this space while being present to the fear of change, which is something that a lot of us are experiencing? What is it that we as individuals can contribute to ourselves and to each other in a way that we consume differently?
You know, one thing that comes is that, like Pema Chandra points out to, is that mindful shimpa, which means mindful attachment. It's if we attend to, if we go with the intention to connect, and that's what mindful attachment is we try and, our intention is to connect. It's not to wrong, or it's not to have the upper hand. It's not about, it's to share, it's to be with whatever. I feel like if we're able to, as leaders, to give more rise to that intent to connect, we will be able to receive ourselves and to hold ourselves with compassion and with dignity, as well as with curiosity, and we stop critiquing ourselves, and we can hold the other from the same thing, from the same space that we give in ourselves. I think if you're going into this with the intent of finding something in particular and you're so attached to it, it needs to be this, it needs to be that, you will come up really disappointed and feel even more disempowered. So again, you're giving your power out, away again, to something that you don't have control over. But you have control over what you want for yourself. I think it's when we intend to connect, we kind of stop paying attention to what has heart and meaning for us. And that's what feels to me it's needed, or it's important these times, like, to switch from consumerism to creating. Because when you feel compassion towards yourself and all, then you're able to open up and to note, to observe, to be curious to what's emerging. And you own up then you step into, through these times, people say to me, how can you, I don't know where the next penny is coming from. I'm like everyone else. I don't know. And yet, I know. And I don't know. I don't know how to explain it to people, but I also know that it's emergent for me. It's not because I'm not attached to its form. It has to be this product or a product base. This is, again, we did in the past with mindfulness. We created yoga retreats and this and that. We became consumers of those spaces, thinking these are the potion, the magic potion, drink it and everything will be fine. Your word will be fine. So I feel one thing that will move us into creator rather than consumers, it's remembering there is rhythm to everything. We need patience. Fast moving. Let us we are now. I think we need to actually start seeing slowing down as the cocoon for creation. If we want to shift into creators, we need to slow down to pay attention. The organs that are pumping and coming to life. Otherwise, we don't notice them.
Yeah.
There are things that happen that we don't even see. You know, I didn't see a lot of things, and I call myself, I'm quite attentive, quite curious and all. And wow, this moment has brought me to my knees, actually. To the other thing is realizing that I'm not in control of anything. And the idea of control is just an illusion. And that's actually what get us too attached to the consumerism, to the product, because we want to be in control, feel and sense that we are in control.
Yeah.
There are so many layers, I feel like, to that consumerism, like, you know, frame or way of, and also like going back to basic again, like, you know, to the simple things that we do in life. Like, you know, I walk. Why do I walk? Why do I take my walks? Why do you take your walks? Rukmini, you have, why do you walk? What's the joy of walking for you?
I think I must say, a lot of times it's mindless in the sense of, not intentional walking, but just movement, right? And yet that movement really transmutes and has the potential to transmute into walking if I feed it with intention. That infusion of intention that changes movement into a walk, into a movement that serves as the space for observation, a movement that shifts me in my being, right?
Yeah,
So yes, like you say, instead of being a consumer of the moment, if I'm willing to at least inject a little bit of intention into that moment, that shifts so much more.
Yeah. So if we intend to connect through that to whatever, I'm not connecting to anything, I'm just connecting. I'm intending to connect to whatever.
Yeah.
So you bring the present. You bring things to things show up.
It's quite relieving, right? That there's really very little doing required of us.
Absolutely. Do you know what? And that's what I love. Manish work in social presencing and embodied poetry. He said something that really, for me, it's one of the most profound words that actually I experienced, but he labeled it for me. In life, there is always a nudge, followed by movement. Through the movement, there is words that come, and then the context gets created. And I feel even in leadership, like when we talk about leading and taking leadership stand, there is always a nudge. There's something that is not, doesn't feel right. And then there is a movement. So we step into that and say, okay, that does not seem to, and whatever movement is that for you. It's like I'll go, like, you know, you see it. And with that movement, my body tells me something. It tells me the need that I'm seeking. You know, I feel like the needs, we're not speaking to our needs. And that's what the body does. The body brings those needs to the forefront. And he puts word into them. Those are your embodied words. And from that, you create whatever you want to create with them. They become your form. And I think if we go back to that simplicity of things, of just trying to embody of what's alive for us, what's its stuckness, what is stuck in us. If we engage that part of us, a lot of information, a lot of healing happens. Like even that collective trauma that we're experiencing, we will heal. That will heal because we start to heal ourselves, and we will kind of end that cycle for.
Yeah, in many ways, you're talking about leadership emerging through the body, and that's a very interesting way to look at leadership as we go forward. And I'm also grateful you brought in and mentioned Manish. Manish is my coach, and so yeah, a shout out to him, Manish, if you're listening to this. Yeah, you must know your work has touched a lot of us.
Absolutely.
And what you said, Amel, also ties in a lot with what Biren shared in the emergent leadership conversation he had a couple of weeks ago, which was around the fact that there is already a lot of indigenous wisdom that exists, uh, which points to leadership that is needed right now, and that there are so many tribal communities that are living in ways that are in absolute alignment with community and with the planet. And all we need to do is really quieten ourselves enough to stop consuming more frameworks and models of leadership, but really to listen and pause and listen to what exists, and to look at how do we embody these existing prototypes in a manner that is gradual and easy and non-threatening. We don't have to shake ourselves into destruction in the process of changing, but really allow ourselves to shed the old and emerge into what's needed. So yeah, how
Yeah,
do you relate to the idea of
yeah.
prototyping what already exists?
Yeah, I think that's again to going back to simplicity. Like we actually living from disconnect. So we're trying to embody the dissonance. We can't embody from dissonance. We need to embody from the embodied, from resonance. So to do that, you do need to access portals or use means to tap into that. And it's all about decluttering. This is what we're trying to do, is to declutter. And you in your decluttering, you need to pay attention to what stays, what is valid from your culture, from your traditions, from your parents and all, and shake away what doesn't serve. I'm not doing my parents shame. I'm not shaming my parents or blaming my parents when I say, for example, my parents insisting and saying like stay within the line, like stop doing this, like you're quite demanding of life, like just why are you not content with what you've got? You're a spoiled child. Was like they've done it with their good heart, but actually the message is like, for me as a child, it was embodied as stay small, don't show up too much, because then you're so even like when in airtime like this, I'm like when I'm speaking, something wants to be spoken through me and I stop it, and it causes me actually blockages in my throat. I feel it because for years and years I've been trying to do that balance, like juggling, like every time that I'm trying to bring what it needs to be spoken through me, I feel like I may be taking time from somebody else, or I'm being the spoiled child again, that is demanding again, that is never happy and satisfied with life. And yet my unhappiness with what was happening, it was exactly what led me to actually being happy with my life. I'm very content with what I am. I'm not saying I'm complete or I'm whole, I'm this, I'm that. I'm far from that. But I'm really loving the fact that each time I'm discovering myself, like I'm discovering part of me. It's so beautiful. And it's not, I think one of the things that we make it sounds very dramatic. It's like, it's arduous. It is an arduous journey. It needs commitment, disciple, follow through, discipline and all. But it's actually a very liberating journey. The walking we're walking in now, the leadership, is liberational. It's my supervisor actually in somatic experience in Sage, her thing, her is embodied liberationist. And I really, really, that really spoke to me. that speaks to me very, very, and I think the old wisdom had exactly that, had freedom in it. At the base of its design, we are born free. So it allows the person to show up. It's like nature. Look at the trees. No tree looks the same. No tree looks the same. And yet it's a beautiful forest. We walk through these forests and we're in awe. And we walk through life and point out to people, look at that, look at that, look at that, and laughing. It's like, why are you not laughing at the trees that are crooked trying to find their ways through the rock? Like, you know, but we are.
Or every snowflake that's different.
Absolutely. And that's actually, I feel like in all traditions or all wisdom, like, you know, that's what he had. He had unity, he had community, he had communion. That's one element that we're missing, is we're never in communion with self. We're constantly in battle with self. So how do we bring communion to self? You know? It's like, how do we, for me, it's like every time that I don't know, no, I know the Buddhists do this and the Hindu, but I don't know. For me, it means something. I don't know what it means, but the word is communion. You know, it's inviting home the part of us, the disowned part of us. It's like the exiled children. Come home. Let's integrate. And that's what like mindfulness practices, like compassion, like loving kindness and all do. Like enables. It's not do. They enable us to tap into. They're all portals to what's already there.
Yeah.
And they're simple portals. And the proof this time in this lockdown, everyone is grateful for nature. And yet, for years, we've been destroying it. We've been walking, we've been stamping through those parks. No care, don't give a shit. And now we're in reverence for that space. We're in reverence for the tweets of the birds in our gardens. We're in reverence, in awe of the flower, the blossoming of the trees and the foliages and all. What has shifted? It's always been there. We have shifted. We are shifting. I think that we are already in that.
Yeah. That's beautiful. What you frame as leadership now being a process of reverent communion. It's liberating, relieving, and reassuring at so many levels. And I think it also, in a way, I'm watching the time, and it nicely also rounds up the conversation and honors the last two conversations with Srilakshmi and with Biren, as we refer to them, and their voices as well. So perhaps one final question would be that if you were to entirely breathe in the last two conversations with Srilakshmi and with Biren and embody their essence, what is it that we need to breathe out to create space for the emergent?
Yeah. So for me, the first conversation brought fear, and the second conversation talked to hope. So what wants to breathe in is these two in communion. Bringing these two in communion. And I think what I'm appreciative of the Gaia journey through the Presencing Institute is he created, or there was a space that's been created to help people bring the both together and to be with them in communion, not in reverence again, and not in fear or the hide or in the denial and this and that. They were They were seen and received and held with so much gentleness through various lenses that were brought in, the body lens, the mind and matter lens, the trauma lens, the we and the I. When the I does the work, the we emerges, the we happens effortlessly, but the I has to be embodied, inhabited. As long as we don't inhabit each one of us, our I, our sacred power, we can't share. And I will leave it to actually, this finishes really beautifully with what Shruti, a conversation I had with Shruti, and she pointed out to that love power, shared power, sacred power. And I feel this is the time for these three. So, yeah, thank you. One comes from power, the other from love. But now we need to bring them here.
Yeah. I think the only thing I have to say to that is to honor the intention of both fear and hope that come together, that both are trying to serve life in their own ways, and when we speak to that intent back to the form.
Yeah, connect to that intent.
Yeah.
So mindful Shimpa. That's it. Mindful attention.
That's a beautiful way of framing it, Amel. Thank you for that. There's leadership even in our intent, and that's just so powerful to work with. And that's something that each of us, regardless of who we are, can hold in ourselves, an intention to be and hold the fear in us and the hope in us as we move forward. So yeah, thank you, Amel.
Thank you. Actually, thank you for creating that space. And thank you for actually acting on what's emerging and committing actually to create a secret place or secret space to actually bring form, because in this conversation you enabled me, you helped me bring form of what has been in my head, what has been the fragments. You actually enabled the fragments to come and to do that. So I'm really, really grateful to you, Rukmini. Thank you.
Thank you. And I must say here that as I'm working through this series, I've been acting on impulse, and I'm deliberately using the term impulse and not instinct, because I know it's not reflex action, it's not as mindless, but an impulse of listening to something that wants a voice. And yeah, the idea has really been about creating that voice and bringing our voices in service of what's emerging. So this is while it's getting acted on through me, it is also a co-created process with everyone that comes into this space. So grateful for each of you who are coming in here.
We just highlighted one thing here.
Yeah.
It's like, remember that everything comes through you.
Yeah.
So as a leader, you're a vessel. There is when you become that, when you connect to that voice, you become that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There is a being that comes, like there is a voice that is spoken through you, because there's that nudge, you followed it, that the impulse becomes.
Yes.
Beautiful. Wow. Thank you. Rich.
Thank you, Amel. And I do want to formally conclude the conversation. I know we can continue speaking endlessly on this, but thanks for being here. And Thank you to our viewers for being here as well. And I see a few comments on Facebook. And we will, of course, also put up the video on our YouTube channel and across our social media platforms. So for those of you who are watching this later, if you want to strike up a conversation, you can do that through any of the platforms that you come across this video on. And Amel and I will be happy to engage with that as well. And of course, in continuation with the series, we are looking to have conversations with leaders on the ground, regardless of age, race, gender, any demographic profile for that matter. So if you are one of those leaders, or if you know of any of those leaders in your spaces, I'd love to have them on this platform. So please do refer them to us. So thank you for being with us, and happy leadership.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a wonderful weekend.